It's often considered a dirty word in the urban planner's lexicon. To some, gentrification, or the influx of wealthy residents and increase in property values, signals a threat to the fabric of a neighborhood. According to a recent study, more than a quarter of Boston residents live in gentrified neighborhoods, the most of any major American city. Washington, D.C. has the second most, followed by New York, Tampa, and Atlanta, tied for third. While gentrification gets plenty of negative attention, there are advantages, too. In this week's Focus Report, we're looking at two neighborhoods grappling with the good and bad. WGBH News reporter Adam Reilly gets us started in Jamaica Plain.
At first glance, the Whole Foods in Jamaica Plain looks like any other. But there are subtle differences, from the salt cod at the fish counter to the shelves of Goya products. Wanda Hernandez is the store's manager and says none of that is accidental.
We truly are who we say we are. You know, we bring a store and we make it fit the community.
When Whole Foods replaced the Latino supermarket Hi-Lo in 2011, critics warned that it would drive up property values and push longtime residents out. Hernandez grew up in JP and says she felt the frustration firsthand. Did you get flack from anyone, friends of yours, family members, who thought that by helping to open this store that you were going to be changing the place in which you'd grown up?
Yeah, I got that, especially from some restaurants and bodega owners that I know. But it's because they hear Whole Foods, they hear corporate America.
In fact, Hernandez says Whole Foods is good for the neighborhood, providing more than 130 well-paying jobs. There's also increased access to organic foods. But Glenn Jacobs says that is just part of the story.
There was a cultural ecology that was just decimated.
Jacobs is a JP resident and UMass sociologist. He's researching the impact of Whole Foods' arrival and says for many Latinos, Hi-Lo was as much a social club as a store.
You could run into people and then see Latino folks who you might not even see outside and whom you would, catch up on news about each other, their families, and you didn't go in there just to pick up something and then leave.
But Jacobs also notes that Whole Foods is just one manifestation of change that's been roiling JP for decades and has some longtime residents feeling like their old neighborhood is being stolen in slow motion.
One of the business owners of a dry cleaner said to me, I have all of these clothes, people haven't picked it up in 1 year. And I said, why not? He said, because they're no longer here. They're out.
Carlos Espinoza Toro is a JP community organizer. He says the impact of gentrification is ambiguous, but says the downside has to be acknowledged.
I cannot make a statement that says that gentrification is good or bad. But what I can say is that when I'm working in the community, the negative impacts of gentrification are real.
Still, Espinoza Toro admits that he is a Whole Foods shopper. So is Glenn Jacobs, the UMass sociologist.
They have a Dominican chef, and they prepare foods. And I go in there, and I'll see rabo, which is oxtail. It's not bad.
Which suggests that the debate over JP's Whole Foods is quieting down. As Wanda Hernandez sees it, it's already over.
I think it's completely faded away.
One of the interesting things about this story is why Whole Foods became sort of the scapegoat for all of gentrification sins in Jamaica Plain. And Emily, I think part of the reason is that it is a corporate entity. If you have an independent food cooperative up the road, or you have an independent expensive restaurant, those might have some sort of a cool or a hip factor attached to eating at them. They bring some cachet. Whole Foods doesn't have that. Whole Foods is a nationwide corporate entity, and I think that that's at least in part why they took such a big hit.
But it's interesting. I mean, I understand the affection for Hi-Lo, but Jamaica Plain remains, to this day, one of the most diversified neighborhoods of Boston, period. So,
every time,
so gentrification aside, I mean, it still remains that.
Right. Every time I end up in JP, which is not frequently, I find it incredibly appealing. I sort of want to move there. In terms of Hi-Lo, I'm not sure the store was as good as a store as some people tend to remember. Glenn Jacobs, the sociologist who we spoke with, said that he's talked to Latinos who say the store was dirty, that it didn't treat its employees that well. And these people say to him, why should we need to shop in a dirty store? Whole Foods is a lot better. So for them, at least, this is a change for the better.
Good issue. All right, Adam, thanks for that report. All right, well, my next guest was in the middle of the great Whole Whole Foods debate. Matt O'Malley is a Boston City Councilor whose district includes Jamaica Plain. Welcome to Greater Boston.
Great to be with you.
Back,
happy St. Patrick's Day,
Yes,
Emily.
to you too. I forgot to wear my green. So I got to ask you, do you shop at the Whole Foods?
I do. I'm a frequent customer. The chef that Glenn mentioned in the package is named Elvis, and I'm a big supporter and customer of his good food.
Were you concerned at first when Hilo was forced out, really?
I was. I came at it at a little bit of a different angle, and I was on the show. It was 3 years now when this first broke. The owners of Hilo was the Knapp Food Company, and they also owned the Omni Foods in Chestnut Hill, which was shuttered for about 15 years. And I had grave concerns that had nothing happened, if Whole Foods didn't go through, we would literally have an empty building right in the heart of one of our most thriving business districts. So I worked with the management, I worked with the owners, worked with the community to try to make sure that we could all coexist as a good neighbor. And I'm pleased to report that Whole Foods has been a great neighbor. They've been supporting local schools, local sports teams. They reached out to many of the employees of Hilo, and quite frankly, they offer them better paying jobs with better benefits.
I mean, I understand what the gentleman in Adam's piece was saying about the culture of Hilo, but I mean, there are so many other things that go along with gentrification. Does have a sort of a bad rap, but. Sure. But the property values do go up. That's good for a lot of people. Unemployment goes down. That's good for a lot of people. It's not this whole idea that somehow the wealthy are pushing the poor out. I mean, is that accurate in Jamaica Plain?
No, I think your premise is correct, and I think that Whole Foods became a flashpoint for many people when the fact of the matter is more and more people are living in cities than ever before. In 2008, more than 50% of the world's population lived in an urban setting. That's never happened before, and Jamaica Plain had been changing. So I think one of the concerns that I had and have been working with my colleagues in government and with neighborhood activists is to address the housing piece. Yeah. And Jamaica Plain, to its eternal credit, really has pushed with new development to make sure that we have affordable units, set-asides that go beyond the minimum 15 or 13%. Some of the new buildings that are going up have as high as 20 or 25% affordable housing units. And the other piece to that is we have to make sure they're multi-bedroom units so that young families can come in and we can protect and enhance the diversity, not only racial diversity, but the economic diversity in JP as well.
All right, I want to bring in Bob Allison. He's chair of the History Department at Suffolk University. Welcome back to Greater Boston.
Thank you, Emily.
So it's obviously not just Jamaica Plain. In fact, from those statistics, Boston has become the most gentrified city in America, which is not surprising. This neighborhood is still sort of ripe for that. But what are, Alston Brighton, I should say, for people who don't know, what are some of the other areas that have really made a turn?
Well, certainly South Boston, Charlestown, Chinatown, all have been under great pressure from gentrification. And you're right. The sign that people are moving into a city is a good thing, and the fact that people with money want to move into a city is a good thing. I think the problem we've run into is when the city thinks this is going to solve all of our problems. Like right now, there's a project in South Boston, over 100 units as high-end condos in a building in formerly an industrial area. Now, as Matt said, we're not encouraging families to move into the city. We're really encouraging people of Matt's generation to move in. And the idea is people between 22 and 34 will move into Boston, live here, and then once they marry and have children, they'll move out to the suburbs. The big problem for Boston's long-term health is to improve the school system and make it a place where families can afford to live. It's not simply the poor who are being priced out. It's really the middle class that we've been losing over the last 10, 15 years.
But then they're replaced by another wave of the young people. I mean,
they are replaced by another wave of young people. As long as Fidelity, as long as Manulife decide they're going to keep their workforce here, that's great. If we can know that in 15 years there are going to be jobs for these people and they won't have moved to North Carolina or New Hampshire or Texas or some other place, great. But if the cost of living here is too high for a workforce, people will be moving out. Businesses will be moving out.
I mean, Jamaica Plain is really one of the most desirable neighborhoods. It's sometimes hard to believe it's part of Boston, if you know what I mean. It's like its own little city. It's beautiful. It's got every kind of housing imaginable, but it is all about the housing. I was coming in from Stoneham today, and I passed that development that's on the railroad tracks. And somebody remarks to me, it's high-end housing. I thought, how can that possibly be? But it is. So how do you maintain, you know, the affordability. I mean, Jamaica Plain isn't all that affordable in certain areas.
No, but the average rents are actually less than the citywide average. I ran some statistics in preparation of appearing here, and 20% of Jamaica Plain's residents that live in the zip code 02130 make a household median average of less than $25,000 per year. 20% make a household median average of above $125,000 per year, which means 60% are in that range. I mean, there is a real thriving middle class. Don't mean to minimize the fact we need to be doing more to make sure that Boston can be an affordable city, and I think it's really four key aspects. It's absolutely the jobs piece. To the professor's point, we need to do more to bring companies here and bring not only small businesses aside from the downtown and the waterfront into the neighborhoods. It's the education piece to make sure that families want to stay here. We've made some great strides in the BPS, but we have more things to do. It's the affordable housing piece, and Jamaica Plain has really embraced that, perhaps more than other neighborhoods, in terms of making sure that those units are factored into new development, and transit-oriented development as well. Forest Hills, we're having some great new housing built down to Jackson Square, along the E-line on South Huntington Corridor. We're seeing that. So I think, to the eternal credit of Tom Menino, Boston is a far better city than it was 20 years ago, and I know that Mayor Walsh will continue that, and we're going to continue to make sure that the middle class and the working class can stay and thrive in Boston.
All right, Bob, Allison, Nat O'Malley, thanks for coming today.
Thank you,
Thank
Emily.
you for having us.